So it's time to talk about the First Order. That being said, this is going to follow my usual methodology. So it's a combination of the movies, extra research I've done, how I think the creative process went. That is, did they screw up? What were they thinking? Where do I think they retcon things? That sort of thing. And me kind of inserting speculation that might not necessarily be based on anything we were given, but on me trying to make things make sense, like based on parsimony and kind of comparing it to what would happen in a real world geopolitical context. So the issue with the First Order and trying to talk about it is it's very obvious that this has been retconned a lot of times. I don't think I think the First Order has more or less been retconned in every movie and in every extra movie appearance. None of the information I could find really meshed with other information I could find. I don't know if it's just not established or the sources I found weren't very reliable. So what we're going to go do is we're going to go through this is I'm going to try to present the various interpretations that have been offered by the supposed new canon. Okay, so what is the origins of the First Order? So this is the first question, and this is something that's changed a number of times. I'm of the opinion that I'm not really sure whether or not they originally intended to bring Palpatine back. And if they were, how big a role Snoke would have to play in it, because Snoke's background has been retconned at least twice, maybe 3 times. So, from what I remember, originally the First Order was a group of Imperial hardliners who existed mostly as a terrorist organization. It doesn't really seem in their original appearance in The Force Awakens that they were a state or any kind of real government, that they were kind of what was left over of the Empire who refused to accept the surrender. I think J.J. Abrams described it as the remnants of the various fascist countries in World War II who all fled to Argentina and then started to work together to kind of make a comeback. So the impression I got of them, because nothing is established in The Force Awakens about who they are, other than the fact that they're clearly a successor state to the Empire, and that they're probably children of Imperial officers, given how young most of them seem. So the impression I initially got was that they were a paramilitary or some sort of terrorist group, but they weren't like a state or a direct successor state to the Empire. Because it was kind of set up that the Resistance and the First Order were battling each other across the galaxy, and the exact nature was unclear and was never really specified, at least not in any of the movies. So that's the first, I think, kind of original view of what the First Order's origin is. So the second view of it is that it was a direct or semi-direct successor state to the Empire. So we're going to have to take a step back and try to deal with the Empire. So in the aftermath of Endor, within the new continuity, the Empire lost all of its territory pretty much within a year. Now, the reason for this is not very well established. Some people, in some continuities I've seen, it's the various warlords somehow destroyed each other within that time period. In others I've seen there's something called the contingency, where Palpatine didn't intend the Empire to outlive him, and so he deliberately caused its downfall. The nature of the contingency has been retconned a couple times, so in like one version of it, most of the Imperial forces jumped away into the unknown regions. However, in like another one, Palpatine deliberately sabotaged various military plans, production, and turned the various factions against each other. So what ultimately happened with the Imperial forces, whether they were destroyed in battle against the New Republic, they destroyed each other, they jumped away into the unknown regions, or they were dismantled following the Empire's surrender, is not really established. I don't think we really have any idea if any sort of centralized government survived Endor. Because within the original continuity, the empire was roughly corresponded to the territories that were loosely aligned to the imperial ruling council, and the various successors who claimed leadership of the entire empire. Like, Isard was nominally the head of the empire. Saint Pestage was nominally the head of the empire, and kind of in between that, you had the imperial ruling council. And so it was sometimes called the mainstream empire, where some warlords would pretend or at least nominally be loyal to that, whereas others would make no attempt at kind of pretending to be loyal to it. Now, one source I saw said that the military maintained unity after Endor. So, like I said, we have no idea what the political situation was, how the Empire lost within the span of a year, what happened to all the superstar destroyers. Either they jumped into the unknown regions, they were dismantled, or they were destroyed in battle. So, following that, we have the Galactic Concordance. Now, the Galactic Concordance ended the Galactic Civil War. Now, one of the problems with this is what happened to the Empire after the Galactic Concordance is not very clear. I've seen several different versions of this. Now, it's been referred to as a rump state. Now, one explanation I've seen was that the Empire's rump state was located up here in the New Territories, or Over Sector Outer, I believe, which was the Pentastar alignment in the original canon, which is actually where the Imperial Remnant canonically was after Pelion took over. So one thing says it was up here, and another source says that the Imperial Remnant was based in the core and inner rim. Now, given that the core and inner rim don't actually border each other, I'm guessing they just mean this general area. And my question is, how, if it's based there, how is it really a rump state? Because the vast majority of the galaxy's population and wealth is within this area. So do they control most of the core? Or do they control most of the colonies in Inner Rim? Where's the New Republic based? I mean, I'm not really sure, because we know Coruscant isn't the capital of the Empire rump state anymore. Whether or not it even has a capital is an open question, because once again, we aren't really sure, is the New Order, what is its relation to the First Order? Sorry, what is its relationship to the Imperial Remnant, if any? So we don't really know where the Empire is located, whether it's in the core, or it's in the New Territories, or if it's in both and it's just not contiguous. Also, I really have no idea who the leader of the Imperial Remnant is. Whether it's Snoke, whether it's the Imperial Ruling Council, whether it's another junta, whether it's a Council of Moths, we don't really know. So my point being, we don't know what the relationship is. So this brings us to another theory of the First Order's origin. So the second theory that I've seen is that the First Order was composed of those who opted to not accept the Galactic Concordance. So it was mainly hardliners who refused to demilitarize, and so they formed together and they fled into the unknown regions to set up their own successor state to the Empire. In this theory, they have no relationship to the Imperial Remnant, and they view them as being traitors or weaklings who failed to carry on the Imperial legacy and gave up. So that's kind of the second theory as to their origins. The third theory is that the First Order is a direct successor state, that the Rump Imperial Remnant was based in the New Territories, which borders the unknown regions, and over the course of the aftermath of the Galactic Civil War, they continually expanded in this direction. So that the First Order was a completely legitimate full state, and that the Rump Empire rearmed in violation of the Galactic Concordance. There's also another one that the First Order pre-existed the fall of the Empire, and was just something that existed, like I said, long before then, and Palpatine had been building it in the unknown regions for decades in the event of his death. So we have all these different theories, and all of them are pretty much mutually exclusive. I don't know if it's been established, or it really can be established, where it actually came from, but That's kind of the different versions of it. So let's just so we don't know if it's a terrorist group or a stateless organization. It could be a group of defectors from the Imperial Remnant. It could be the Imperial Remnant, or it could be a completely unrelated organization. So we really have no idea. Now, once again, going back to astrography, if that's how you pronounce the term, we don't really know how much territory the First Order has. So initially, it seemed like they didn't really control any territory, and they were just kind of an armada that was moving from place to place. And this is kind of reinforced in The Last Jedi, where the capital of the New Order is not on a planet, it's on the Super Star Destroyer, the Supremacy. Which would kind of imply to me, this combined with how big their starships are relative to their population, would seem to imply to me that they're mostly mobile. But this actually isn't the case, and they have hundreds of sectors and like thousands of planets within the unknown region. So whether or not these planets are colonized, like they were pre-existing human settlements that were incorporated into the First Order, whether they were territories that were colonized during the course of Palpatine's reign, or whether it's entirely consisted of Imperial officers and their children who settled these regions. We know there's a lot of slavery within these regions, as the unknown regions are, I think, almost entirely non-human. I mean, there's some near humans in them, like the Chiss, but I don't know if the Chiss have any relationship with the First Order. I also have no idea what the relationship of the Final Order and the Sith Eternal is with the First Order. Whether or not Exegol was always a part of First Order, if it's a completely separate organization, whether the First Order's resources were being used to build the Final Order Sith fleet, I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. None of this is very clearly established. And I'm not speaking this way to like just deride the new one. I'm just legitimately, I don't get it. These are just kind of some theories that I have based on some of the information that is available. So let's talk about the structure of the First Order. Now, this is an issue we have with Supreme Leader Snoke. So there's been multiple retcons. I think at one point he was probably supposed to be Darth Plagueis, if we can believe any of the leak. So that is one possibility. Whether or not he played a role in Palpatine getting overthrown, and he had been planning this, if he had kind of been biding his time, we don't really know, but that's one possible theory as to the origin of Snoke. Now, the canon explanation we were given prior to the rise of Skywalker is that Snoke is an ancient Force being who has some sort of grudge against the Jedi, and his group are called the Navigators or something like that. I don't recall what their name is, but they're a group of Force-sensitive Navigators who are strong with the dark side. Because the main reason the unknown region isn't known is the hyperspace lanes are very unstable there. In Star Wars, you have things like roads. As you can see here, there's different hyperspace lanes connecting, and most of them are very stable. And the reason you have the space lanes is they're reliable places you can go without running into planets or other stuff and escaping anomalies. That's why the deep core is not really that well settled, because there's so many black holes and spatial distortions there. It's very hard to get into it, which is what makes it such a good fortress region. And wild space in the unknown regions is very similar to that. In a lot of cases, they just aren't very well mapped. The Chiss and other civilizations within the region guard it very jealously, and even they have trouble getting around inside of the unknown regions. But because of Snoke and the other navigators and their Force abilities, they were able to help the First Order expand rapidly within the unknown regions and build their empire there. And then the rise of Skywalker's retcon is that he was a semi-clone or something who was made by Palpatine to be his puppet. So I don't know if this is like a retcon or like Palpatine set up this like 4D chess thing where Snoke pretended to be a Darksider from this ancient race and there was never a group of navigators. They were just things created by Palpatine as like some sort of missionaria protectiva type deal. We don't really know who Snoke is. Like I said, there's at least 3, maybe 4 different versions of who he is and where he came from, and we don't really know how he became Supreme Leader. But for whatever reason, he is the Supreme Leader of the First Order. Now, its government appears to operate as a junta. I don't see any evidence that there is any form of civilian government. I don't believe, unless I'm mistaken, we see any Moths, for instance. How the Empire worked is, the Empire is interesting because it was kind of more and less centralized than the New Republic. Sorry, than the Old Republic, than the Empire, than you might expect. So it was divided up into sectors and over-sectors that were governed by Moths, and Moths had an immense amount of autonomy, such as commanding military forces within their area. The Empire actually had a pretty strict subjugation of military to civilian authority. Even when Pellaeon was obviously the military dictator of the Imperial Remnant, he had to go in, he at least made the public signal of going to the Moths and getting their approval before suing for peace. Civilian government doesn't really seem to exist within the First Order, although it's kind of weird that it's called the Supreme Leader and not like the Grand Marshal or something like that. Maybe, like, because in the case of the Imperial Remnant, when Pellaeon is head of state, he takes the title Supreme Commander, or something to that effect. So I'm not really sure why they have a civilian title in an organization that's clearly a junta, but that's the case. I think Regent would have been another good title, given that in some fanfics I've seen, if Thrawn survives, he takes the title Regent. Because it is still the Empire, but there's no monarch. So you can kind of get into like a Franco situation where there isn't a reigning monarch, but it's technically a regency. So whoever kind of the military leader of the country is takes the title regent. Hothi is another example, or Houthi, the admiral who led Hungary. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name properly. So there's that. There's also the Knights of Ren, which we don't know anything about. I'm not. They're apparently a group of Darksiders. Now, I'm not sure if they're Dark Jedi, if they're some form of Sith, or if they're something completely different. But they apparently exist as the religious body within the First Order. Now, in The Last Jedi, we see that there's only like 8 of them. So I don't really know if there's like more of them, if they're like, they fulfill the role of the Inquisitors, of like Imperial intelligence, but they are also there. Now, Palpatine had a lot of Darksiders working for him, ranging from very strong ones like Jarek, who could probably be called a Sith Lord, to less strong ones like Mara Jade, at least with her powers repressed. We can go into that some other time. Who served him as assassins and spies. They didn't really have a formal position, though, other than Vader. They were just kind of something behind the scenes. So I don't know how formal the Knights of Ren are, what their position is within the First Order hierarchy. So let's go back to the movies and kind of the timeline. So in the events of The Last Jedi, it says in the opening crawl that the New Republic has fallen. So I don't know if that means that the First Order has placed the New Republic under military occupation, if there's a sort of anarchy at the moment, if they've started to try to set up a civilian government. We really have no idea as to what's happening by the time of The Last Jedi. How the First Order really expects to occupy the galaxy is an interesting question at this point. It's very clear that they're operating with a very small population. As you can see, they have an extreme preference for quality over quantity. The stormtroopers are much better trained, better equipped, and better organized than they were in the previous Empire, whereas their ships have a much bigger focus on quality over quantity. They've gotten rid of a lot of the flaws with the previous ships. They've made the bridge a lot less exposed. They've dramatically improved shielding and armor. They've added on a lot of point defense lasers, and their starfighters are much better than previously. This is also kind of reinforced by the idea that they don't have the sheer amount of territory the Galactic Empire had, so they can't really rely on recruiting as many people. Now, as to where the stormtroopers come from, there's multiple versions of this. Some people said that that the children are taken from territories within the Imperial Remnant or within the First Order colonies. Other people say that they're kidnapped from across the galaxy. Once again, if the Imperial Remnant is based in the core, they shouldn't have this population problem, because the core has a huge population. So I don't really know, to be honest, where they get their population from, but I think we can determine they have a much smaller pool, and so they focus on extreme quality or quantity. And that being said, I don't know how they expect to occupy the rest of the galaxy and to bring the New Republic down. Maybe their idea is if they can defeat the New Republic as a central government, they can gradually expand and retake territory. Or maybe they expect a lot of former Imperial worlds to just rejoin them. I think it's also said in some material that a number of planets were already rejoining the Imperial Remnant and the First Order prior to their huge war, and that this process was accelerating as the centrist faction became more and more disillusioned with the ineptitude of the New Republic. Once again, though, we don't really know where Palpatine got his soldiers to man his massive fleet of like battle cruisers. I don't know where he got the resources to build them. Did he use cloning? Like, what happened? General Pride seemed to know that he was in charge. So I don't really understand any of that. When Kylo Ren stepped down as Supreme Leader, it's not really clear if there was any system of succession in place. That is, was Kylo Ren succeeded by another military leader? I know Hux was dead, but like another Allegiant general or another field marshal or maybe another Darksider. My thinking would be if there was any kind of civilian government, the Council of Moffs would maybe elect someone, at least as an interim leader, or just whoever was the next highest in the military hierarchy would take over. But this doesn't seem to be the case. After Kylo Ren defects, General Pride pledges the First Order's resources to Palpatine, and even though none of the First Order shows up to help during the Battle of Exegol, they somehow get defeated off screen and lose all the territory that they managed to conquer. Now, I don't really know what happened to the First Order in terms of their home territories, because the territories in the unknown regions, no one's really sure where they are outside of the officer corps of the First Order. And the planets are mostly governed by, are mostly populated by Empire hardliners. But somehow, after Palpatine dies, despite the First Order civilians and military not knowing about him, this also ends the First Order. All of the planets that they occupy either get immediately conquered by the non-existent Republic Navy or immediately surrender and join the New Republic. I'm not really sure why there wouldn't just be another successor government, or maybe some sort of like new Imperial Remnant that maintains aspects of the New Order and continues kind of an autocratic form of government. And once again, we don't really know what happened with the Imperial Remnant after the First Order overthrew the Republic. Did they also invade the Imperial Remnant? Did the Imperial Remnant just absorb the New Republic territories? I don't really know. I also don't know why they wouldn't just rename themselves the Empire at that point in time. So that's about all I can come up with regarding the development and organization downfall of the First Order. As I tried to make clear here, there's been a lot of retcons, a lot of contradictory information, and just for the most part, we don't really know very much. But hopefully I kind of laid out the facts as I could understand them there. I hope you enjoyed this video and kind of took something from it. There's lots more content to come. God bless you all, and may the Force be with you.